Maseches Beitsa, Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, 3 lines from the top. Amar Rav Nassan Bar Abba Amar Rav. Go ahead.
So what's with the Gemora?
Which one is it?
You could read.
Rav Nachman Bar Abba Amar Rav. Mechutin et ha'petila biyom tov. And then Amar asks questions. Ma mit mechutin. What is mechutin?
Right.
So Amar Rav Chinin Abba Shalimam Shalmiya. Le'olvia ha'chosh.
Dui. Dui.
Le'odui choshecha. It means to remove remove the darkness. That's the darkness we explained yesterday. It sits on top of the candle.
Right. It's a small little charged piece that develops at the end of a wick that's burned over a long time. And it inhibits the proper radiance of the light. So in a sense it is producing darkness. So you can remove it. And I guess in the context of the sugya so far, this is a chiddush because we know that any tikkun has been forbidden till now, and this would seem to be a tikkun, but apparently it's not a direct tikkun to the wick. As we said yesterday, it's almost removing an impediment which is outside the wick. In any event, that leads us to the next step, which is to give a big summary of many halachas. Some of them we've seen, some of them we haven't even seen yet, regarding the wick.
Right. So from about kafara. Vav 6. Devarim Shana Imru Bepitila Gimel Lachamir Vegimel Lahakal. So they 6 things are said about the wick. 3 of them are Machmir, and 3 are lenient. And then he gives examples of these things. Lachamir ein kodlin ota. So one of the chamurim is we don't. What do we say? They braid. We don't braid the wick.
Which is how they used to make it. So basically don't make the wick, but the way you make a wick is you take a few strands and you braid them together and they become a wick.
And this letechila b'yom tov, from the purpose of yom tov. The aim of even otor ba'or, and we don't let it singe it with flame. The aim chodchin otam l'shanayim, and we don't cut it into 2 pieces. We don't cut the wick into 2 pieces.
Right, so that's a halacha we already saw in our Mishnah.
Right.
So it is interesting that Rav Yehuda Nasi left certain halachas out of the Mishnah. Perhaps he felt we would understand on our own that these things are forbidden.
So now follow the 3 leniencies. Lakal me ma'akar beyad. We are able to compress or squeeze the wick with our hand. Mashara b'shemen, and we are allowed to soak it, I guess, in oil. V'achot ba'or. Pepi shtei norot, and we're allowed to cut it, separate it, using flame into 2 separate wicks.
But if you keep them in 2 separate containers and it looks like you're lighting it.
Right.
So that was exactly what we had said earlier to explain Shittas Rav Yehuda. It seems like that's being borne out clearly here in this price.
Right, and that's where we got up to yesterday.
Okay. Now, we saw there's not much Rashi here, but did we see the Rashis?
Duye
Okay.
Choshcha. Kishehi Na'ases Barosha, when it is made. Duye Choshcha, first one.
Rashi, last line, a wide line in the top of 4 lines of Rashi.
Right.
Kishehi Na'ases Barosha, when it is made, right?
When it becomes like produced, as it were.
Produced Barosha.
In its end, at the
Its
end.
end. Pecha Mavira.
What gets produced there?
Charcoal.
A little piece of charcoal, a little charred matter. Then you're allowed what?
Duye
Ma'avira.
Na'asir, right? Mavira, only pass it over. Is that a yod or
Right.
Duya means Na'asir means to remove.
Right.
Choshcha Pecha. Is a charcoal Chashich oil. Darkens out the light.
Okay. So we said Ne'emru
Nemru
Psila. There were 6 halachas said about the Psila.
Yom Tov.
On Yom Tov. Right? Even though I think we understood it in the context of the sugi that we're still talking about Yom Tov, but it's good to say it because if it's in a Mishnah, we know it's in this Masechta, it's all following in halachas about Yom Tov. It's in a Beitsa, so it's not always clear. And plus, there's extra halachas that we haven't seen before. Rosh says they're all about Yom Tov. Nothing here is separate from this question.
My Gemara's got a little Torah or next to it.
Yeah.
What is that referring?
I think it's more the Masoras of Shas. He's telling you whether to read Mishmei Derav, that one. There's in parentheses, there's the words Mishmei Derav with an asterisk, and then on the side it says some people do have Mishmei Derav, some people don't. Next to the Vav, of Vav Devarim, there's another note on the side that says Tosefta Perik Gimel. It says it is a Tosefta of this Masechta, and it's in the 3rd Perik of that Tosefta. This Beitsa that we're about to read. Is that what you're referring to?
There's a tiny little Torah or parrot.
The Torah or is where the Psukim are mentioned, and it's between the Gemora and the Rashi.
Yes.
That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
I don't have anything there between I'm not sure what you're reading. Yeah. What about that? You want to know what that means?
No, why is it there?
No, that's telling you who wrote this. Like, who wrote that this pasuk comes from Devarim Yigimel and this pasuk comes from Eov. That's a Torah or did that. Someone who wrote a sefer called Torah or he did that. And it's really every time that there's a note of where to find it. Here again, Vayikra Kaf Gimel, he's the one who told you where to find it. So it's a credit for whenever he gives you a source. Some of the newer editions have what's called Torah or a Shuling. That in the margin they actually tell you the entire pasuk, not just a paraphrase. But that was a separate sefer that someone wrote with every source of what the Gemora brings to tell you where to go and find it. Because very often when you look up a pasuk and you see the context of the pasuk, or you see the actual perush of the pasuk that's brought in that part of Tanakh, so it helps understand. That's why he wrote the Sefer Torah. Okay. So Rashi says. Ma'acha b'yad.
Ma'acha b'yad, to crush it with your hand. Tikun klach hayad hu. You're fixing with the klach hayad means back of the hand, right?
Literally, but it really means a change from the normal way of doing it. Because often the way you could do a change is with doing it with the back of your hand. So it became an expression for any change, nicknamed kalach hayad. It just means change, just means what we call a shinui. So Rashi's saying this is a problem, so it should have been a problem, but since it's a proper shinui, I don't know the normal way you would do it. I'm not sure what it means, the normal way that you would do it. Maybe there's special pliers that they use or something. So by using your hand, I mean, that's what the Beitsa says, do it in the hand. And Rashi says that's a shinui, that's kalach hayad, means that's a shinui. What's the shinui? You're doing it with your hand. It doesn't say you're doing it with your hand in an abnormal way. So it seems like doing it with your hand is already the shinui, because maybe people normally use pliers or some other kind of implement. So as soon as you do it with your hand, you're already doing a shinui. In a sense, we do that when we do borer, right? We take what we want with our hand. That's one of the conditions of doing borer on Shabbos. Take it with your hand. But that's a shinui from the normal way is to use a proper implement like a funnel or a sifter or something to separate the good from the bad. Some people say when you use your hand, it's also called you're doing it in the way of eating and not in the way of borer. But basically, there's a hierarchy of implements that are normally used, and if you don't use them, then you're going in the opposite direction. You're doing a shinui, you're not doing the real malacha. Okay, so now we're up to a new little section that has to do with, it's almost like an afterthought of the whole sugya. We mentioned different midos, 6 different things were mentioned about Yom Tov and the wick, so here we're going to go into a new list of different things. Who's doing the Gemora?
If you do the Rashi, I'll do the Gemora.
I'll do the Rashi.
So we carry on by Amar Rav Natan?
Yeah.
Abba. Amar Rav.
That's the connection, right? The previous statement was already the same person. Rav Nachman bar Abba in the name of Rav. And probably because there aren't so many opportunities that the Gemara brings that combination of that person in the name of Rav, so they bring another statement of his.
Right. This is Atirei Bavli. So
Bubble.
Your day.
Your day.
Gehinnom.
Hey.
When they go down to Gehinnom, remember that they all up, the top becomes a shin, right?
Right.
So it's Ashra. It's the wealthy people.
That's right.
Okay.
Those who are wealthy, who live in Bavel, the wealthy, the elite of Bavel, they are destined to go down to Gehenna. Right? In other words, they are a bunch of crooks, so to speak.
What does that mean?
Shabbatai explained himself very well, that we have an old rule that a shin in Hebrew will turn into a tuf in Aramaic, right? You know that rule, right? So an ashir, what is an ashir?
A rich person.
A rich person. So ashirei,
Rich people.
the rich people of the wealthy people, the rich people of Bavel, the upper class, all do a certain avera, so they're all basically chastised in this Gemora, but maybe by saying it publicly, he was able to convince some of them to do tshuva. It doesn't say what's so wrong with what they did, but I guess we're about to find out.
Ki hai Shabbatai ba.
Shabbatai, oh my gosh.
Shabbatai
Bar
Marinus.
Marinus.
It almost sounds Greek, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's hard to know where these names came from, but in the ancient world there was a mixture of cultures.
Shakhtar the Greek.
Yeah, not simple. The marinologist.
That's a fishy story, right?
We're about to find out.
Okay, so Ekla Lebavel. Ekla means to visit.
He arrived.
Arrive. He arrived in Babel. Ba'ai minahu, boya minahu, aska. And he requested from them aska. You know what aska is?
Iska is like ASIC. What's an ASIC in modern Hebrew?
Business.
Business. So it could be a specific type of business, or it could just be, a lot of times you would ask people to lend you merchandise and then you went around peddling it, made a bit of extra money, and then gave them back their loan. Sometimes that's what it means.
Like a traveling salesman, no?
Like you've heard of the Heter Iska? Right? Heter Iska is what allows us to lend with ribis. What's behind a Heter Iska? Why do we suddenly let you lend with ribis? It's usher. What does this Heter Iska do, actually?
That's your partner.
No, you can't do it for business purposes. You can do an avera. No. I mean, some people think you can, but no. So it has to be that somehow it's setting it up in a way that's still mutter.
It's like a bank.
But you do it with a bank. But what exactly does it do that makes it mutter?
You become a partner.
That you make him a partner. The person lending you is actually investing in a business. That's why some of them, sometimes it's hard to really do it because you can't really say what the business is. Right? So, but that's really the idea of it. You're starting a business with that person. So in a sense, they're lending you to go make business and make profit, and then you split the profits. So obviously it has to be done in a special way. But that's the backbone of it. And yeah, I'm going to turn off the clock.
It's called Heter Iska.
Heter, because if you make an iska out of it, you make business, then it has to be written up in such a way that it's clear what's being done. Otherwise, it's a bit of a joke.
Sounds like another runner.
But again, that's why you have to write it up properly. That's why the same thing with selling hummus to a goy on Pesach. If it's done as a joke, and nobody really is serious about it, then it may not be worth the time and energy. But if you do it properly, and the Rav knows all the halachas, and he truly sells the chametz, so then it's a sale. You have to make it as legal as possible, so it truly is a business deal. It truly is an investment for the bank, as it were, whoever's giving it.
So we think that here, this gentleman is asking for merchandise to go and sell.
I think that is what he's really asking, to go into business, to do a business, but I think often it refers to getting merchandise to go and sell so that you can make business. So in a sense, he's asking them to believe him, to trust him.
Okay. V'lo yeru le mezoni.
I don't think you're pronouncing it correctly.
V'lo yehavu.
Yahavu. Right.
Yehavu le mezoni.
Again, you could say that, but you see the next word is mezon,
Mezon.
which means you're repeating the word mazonos twice, which would indicate that there's a kind of a phrase going on there, and it may be a new sentence. So don't be convinced you have to throw that word in. You might be allowed to put a comma earlier.
So he.
Let's just translate the words first. What are the words?
So they didn't give him mazonos. They didn't feed
Okay,
him.
but again, let's say you wouldn't put the word mazonos in that phrase. Let's say you stop the sentence right before that. Would it make sense?
Lo yehavu le. They didn't give him any Oh, right. So
What
then,
didn't they give him?
They
They
didn't
didn't
give
give
him
him what he had been asking for. What had he been asking for? Some kind of a loan, or whatever. Start a business.
Right, okay, see it. Mazoni, Mazonami lo Izanahu. So Mazonos, they wouldn't give him, they also didn't give him Mazonos. They didn't feed him, in other words. So he also
Right, so it seems like both things they failed in. They failed to help him start a business or just get some business going. They also didn't feed him. So like they just completely ignored their responsibility to the stranger in their midst. Which seemingly, if you don't live in Sodom, you have a chiyuv to be nice to the people who come to visit, to help them, right? That's called Hachnasas Orchim, and there's a special society that's set up to deal with visitors and so forth. And it could be, if he's actually come to live there, then he's not even a visitor. But once he's there for 30 days or something, then he's considered to be a resident, right? Like a new resident of the town. Anyhow, so he's not going to be happy with that. That's supposed to be an example of why the wealthy who could have helped him, let's say, are going to get Gehenna, because they had the means to help this poor man who probably looked like a Talmid Chacham. He's called a Rav by the Gemora. Anyone who's called a Rav by the Gemora is probably not a slouch, right? Although here's just Shabbatai Bar Marinos. It doesn't call him Rav Shabbatai. So perhaps that, but still, it seems that if he would have looked like a vagabond, perhaps there would be no taina. I didn't help him because he looked like, a person who wasn't responsible. Why should I lend him money, or why should I? But it could be, it's almost like being manavshach. If he looked presentable, he should have lent him money and trusted that he was going to pay back. If he looked homeless, then you should have fed him.
Yeah.
Can't not do anything. In any event, before we get to the next little part, let's see some of the Rashis here.
Yorde Gehenna.
Why did he call the people in Bavel Yorde Gehenna? So you see in Rashi 2 points. Just to say they didn't do tzedakah is kind of missing the point. Maybe you don't have the money to do tzedakah or some other reason, but no, they weren't merachim to do tzedakah. The real reason they didn't do tzedakah was because they weren't merachim, right? And that happens to a person if he doesn't take care to have compassion. He can lose his compassion, right? It can happen that a person becomes calloused and unsympathetic to people because. What happened, for example, in history, we're coming up now to Megillus Rus. What happened in Megillus Rus? Do you know what happened in Megillus Rus, really?
With Boaz, right?
Huh?
With Boaz?
Before Boaz showed up. Before that. I mean, it is true. That's a nice follow-up to the story. What happened with Boaz. But at the very beginning, how did the whole story get started? Do you know?
To Moab, right?
Why did he go to Moab?
Because he didn't want to deal with the country. Famine.
Why?
Famine.
Why?
He didn't get the money.
He was wealthy. Exactly this story here. He was wealthy. People were knocking on his door to give tzedakah and help in the famine. What did he do? Ran away to his family because he didn't want to have that responsibility. Right? It was basically the same problem of lack of empathy, lack of sympathy, lack of rachmanis. It was a very callous thing, and he got punished for it. Right? He lost both of his sons, so he paid dearly for that mistake. But that's considered the beginning of the Megillas, a lack of sympathy, a lack of rachmanis. Exactly the time here, not wanting to do tzedakah because you lack rachmanis. Right, just the fact that you, even though I think I heard once that Rav Yisrael Salanter used to daven that he shouldn't become wealthy because he felt it's a responsibility he's not going to be able to live up to. What did he feel that if he becomes wealthy, you have to know the name of every poor person in the entire community and take care of them. He felt he'd have a tremendous responsibility. He may not live up to it. They say once he had a dream that became wealthy. You know how he responded to that?
Fasted.
He treated it as a bad dream, and he went to the Tavas Chalom and fasted and basically did tshuva that this horrible dream shouldn't come true. Most of us would have been like, yeah, I want to be wealthy. But he knew enough to know that it's a tremendous responsibility. If you don't live up to it, it can happen to you. Chas Shalom, what happened to Elimelech, or what the Gemora here says is how going to happen to the people in Bavel. And I'm sure today we could take the word Bavel and substitute it with other localities around the world. Although thank God there are some Jews who do proper philanthropy, and
So Africans give generously.
apparently they do, but there may be some who don't, and there may be some who don't give enough. You know, it says that Rabbi Akiva married the daughter of someone. Yeah, but there was another wealthy man. What was his name? Who used to give tzedakah in an improper way, and he got punished. The Gemora in Ksuba says his daughter ended up very destitute. And the Gemora says, how could that happen? And the Gemora says, because he didn't give properly. He didn't give to the... He used to, when he went out to the Beis Midrash in the morning, he would have them put silk along the way to walk on, so he wouldn't have to walk on the ground. They didn't have proper sidewalks in those days. So he had them put silk, and then he would leave it for the poor. Big mitzvah, right? He's helping give silk to the poor. It's like feeding the poor. But he didn't do it directly, he did it indirectly, right? Like he just left it for them. He didn't give it to them. He used it for himself, and then, okay, I'll leave it. Or it says for him that was a problem. In any event, okay, so you have to be careful to do it, and to do it properly, and to do it enough. Okay, so this is the time against them. They're not marachim to give tzedakah, to do tzedakah. So this fellow showed up, Shabbatai showed up, and he wanted to start a business. They wouldn't help him. What does that mean? He wanted iska, and they didn't give it to him. What does that mean, Rashi says?
Iska schara.
Which is?
Merchandise.
And what would he have done with that merchandise?
Stocker would have sold it.
He staker, for the word sachar.
Rent it.
No. Sachar, like schar va'onish, reward. Schar is really not just reward, it's like profit. Sometimes you can use it as like a profit, when you profit.
To profit, right?
Yeah, to make a proper wage, let's say. Like a sachir. Sachir is like a person who works for a wage, right? Schirut is like rent. It's not. Yeah. So he wanted to listaker, to basically to make a profit. So he wanted to take that's what they used to do. And by the way, that's what an adunya is. That's what a dowry was in the old days. If your daughter got married, you'd give them a certain amount of merchandise to start their wedding with. How does that help them? That they can then set up a kind of a small store or concession and start to sell that merchandise and make money, and eventually they'll have a proper parnasa. That was a very common way. Now, this is what we said. Iska implies that it's like a proper business deal, not just give me merchandise, but the merchandise should be given almost as a loan, but in a business sort of way, to do what?
The math is to split the profits.
Right, to get half the reward. In other words, I'll take the merchandise, I'll go sell it, and if I make, let's say, $100, I'll give you 50 and me 50. Right? Why? Where's the justice in that? Because it's like a silent partner, so it's called a silent partner, right? I give you the money, you go out and do the work. So you're doing a certain amount, I'm doing a certain amount, then we can split the profits.
Franchise.
Yeah, but this is how it's almost like a loan. You could say, look, he's loaning, they want a loan for the extra profit. No, I'm lending you, but not really as a loan, so that you can go out and do a business, and I'm like the silent partner that when you make money, we split the profit. That's why we call a loan where there is ribbis given, and we don't want it to be ribbis, we call it a business deal such as this. So we promise to split the profit, as it were, and therefore anything that happens further down the line, we look at it as there's something somebody profited, and now when I give you back more than you loaned me, I'm giving you back the original money plus the profit. In any event, okay, so that's what he wanted. He said, please, lend me, 100 barrels of wine or 50 barrels of wine, and I'm going to set up a business over here, and we'll split the profits. There's a certain kind of tzedakah. It's not direct tzedakah. The Rambam says there's 10 levels of tzedakah. Or 7, I think it's 10. Right? Maybe it's 7. And how do they go? What's the lowest level of tzedakah? For me to give, the lowest level of my giving tzedakah is what? Giving directly to the person who needs. Because then he's embarrassed, and I have that kind of power over him, so we know each other. The next level is already to give without him knowing who gave, so he doesn't have to be embarrassed. And you know what the highest level of tzedakah is? This. Because did you notice Rashi called this tzedakah? He said they don't want to, that they don't have rachamim, but because of they don't have rachamim, they don't want to do tzedakah. And then he talks about the business deal over here. So where's the tzedakah? That is the highest level of tzedakah, the Rambam says.
Helping someone with a business.
Helping someone start a business. Because you are giving them, you don't have to do this, right? And maybe you don't even need the money, but you are doing it in such a way that he can feel honorable about himself. Again, the 7 levels of tzedakah, or whatever, are all in terms of, is the person going to be embarrassed? So in which case does he have the most self-esteem, the most dignity intact?
When you help someone set up a business.
When he doesn't really feel like I'm giving him tzedakah. That's why they actually say that Rachel was a genius in giving tzedakah, because she made Leah feel, when she let her marry Yaakov, that later on, you know what Leah says? You stole my husband. It's the exact opposite. Rachel let Leah marry Yaakov, so she shouldn't be embarrassed. But she made her feel so good about it that later, when Rachel wanted to be a wife also, Leah said, you stole my husband. She made Leah feel so much that if she wasn't really giving her something, that Leah can actually turn the whole thing around and feel like she's the ikar. So a real way to give tzedakah is to make a person feel dignity. It's not really doing tzedakah. That's what I'm saying. The idea is the dignity of it. As long as the more dignity a person has, that's a higher level of tzedakah. And the highest level is where you don't even really seeming do any tzedakah, just helping him start a business. But that is a kind of tzedakah. I'm taking my money and I'm helping you make a parnasa. I'm helping you start a life. That's the highest level. Because I'm helping you with my money. I don't really have to do that. And I'm doing it in such a way that you feel the most dignity possible. So Rashi calls that tzedakah as well. So they didn't want to do that. Okay. Maybe they didn't want to gamble, they didn't want to whatever, they didn't trust him. But they also didn't give yeah. Sha'al Mehem
asked about them.
No, he asked from them. He asked from them, and he asked from them.
Food.
Mm-hmm.
These are not main food also, is new.
Right, so Rashi is telling you how to phrase it. Mizoni, meaning that he also asked for Mizoni. And then the answer is, Meizan Namilo Zunu. They didn't give him any food in response to that either. So he asked for a loan to start a business. They didn't help him. He asked for food. They didn't help him. So, as I said before, it's economy manavsha. If you want to say, I don't trust you because you look like a vagabond, okay, so don't let him take your money to start a business. Don't look upon that. Maybe you have a heter, you could. You know what it says that who saves us from Gehenna? The Gemora says in Sukkah. The cheaters save us from Gehenna. You know how the cheaters save us from Gehenna? Because there's so many people out there asking for tzedakah who aren't ehrlich, who aren't true. They're cheaters. So later, when I don't give to tzedakah, now I can always, when I get to Shemaim, I'll say, I thought they were cheaters. I thought they were deceptive people. And I didn't give them because I didn't think they were really poor people. So what gives me a time to say that? Because there really are poor people out there who are faking it, right? So because there are people who are faking it, I can use that as a taina later to get out of Gehenna. Because when they want to take me to Gehenna for not giving tzedakah, I can always say, I didn't think he was a real ani. I thought he was faking it. So the people who really do fake, we owe them a karas hatov for helping us avoid Gehenna. It's an interesting Gemora. But the point being, you have to be truthful. If you didn't think he could handle a business loan, so at least give him tzedakah as a vagabond. You're calling him a vagabond. At least give him mazonos, give him food as a vagabond. No, right? Because I think he's faking it. Well, if he's faking it, then then maybe he really is a businessman. In any event, they didn't have rachmanis. That's what the bottom line is. Rashi said. So therefore they get Gehenna.
They're kind of like grouping them all together here. They're saying the wealthy of.
Well, it could be enough people did it that they all have to. Either because we're just generalizing that enough people did it, so we can generalize about the group. Although the truth is, if there's some people in a group who don't do something, and you accuse the whole group of something bad, you're saying lashon hara.
It's a little bit like the Rambam says about the doctors. All good doctors go to Gehenna. Yeah?
Rov rofim. No, there it says rov rofim. Most. Majority. But you could say, this might be a bit of a stretch, but to answer your question, perhaps the answer is that the ones who don't do it are clearly doing an avera. The other people who know that that's happening, they should be protesting. Meaning, there's wealthy people who could influence the community and set things straight and reorganize the community in a way that takes care of all these people. So it could be the people who don't lend or don't give, they're clearly doing a bad thing. Even the ones who do give, but they also can't just get out of it by saying, I'm okay, if they know their friends are turning people away and making people starve. So if there's a bad situation, you can't just say, well, I'm an island and I take care of myself. No. Even if you're giving tzedakah, but you know people around you are being cruel to the anim, you might be responsible.
Yeah, I can certainly buy the fact that they should feed him. But for a person to walk into your shop and say, you see those clothes? Give me some, I want to go and sell them, I'll give you a profit.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say is perhaps he was there for a short period of time. Perhaps he would stay a few days and got to know them, and he understood that day one they're not going to just give you. As who says we don't even know you? What are you talking about? But maybe he was there for a few days. The real chiyuv of tzedakah is after 30 days, because then you know the person, he becomes part of the community. Before then, you don't really have the chiyuv of taking care of him to that same extent. Like Rav Yisrael Salanter said, I don't want to become wealthy because then I have to know everybody in the community and their needs. I have to be more familiar with everyone in the community. We have to be part of the community to really have that true responsibility. If they're just passing through, it's a different responsibility. So maybe even before day 30, they don't even really have a true status of being a resident, that you really have a chiyuv to take care of them. So maybe it's just assumed that he was there for 30 days. Many times the story is told, you don't have all the facts in front of you. You just have the bare minimum. He came and he asked them for something. But maybe it means within the normal boundaries of human decency, where if he would have asked them on day one, nobody would have a real taina. Still might have to feed him. That's what I was saying before. There's a kind of a miman of shachir, where it says both things. It's like they didn't treat him as a proper businessman, but then they at least should have given him as an ani.
So it shouldn't have reversed where they didn't feed him, and they also didn't give him stuff
The order is
to sell.
wrong. The order is wrong.
Yeah.
I hear
You
what
come to your front door, I'm really hungry. Have a cup of tea.
Again, maybe there's a certain period of time in which you say he was there for a short period of time, that they knew he's not just a fly by the night guy, and he did become part of the community to some extent. He's still new. They know he's a new guy. They don't know everything about him. But then at that point, he really wanted a loan. He didn't want a free lunch. He said, "Look, I don't want to just mooch off the community. If you give me a certain chance, I can make my mark over here. Help me out." And he maybe talked to even the heads of the community. Maybe even talk to the I don't know. But then, if they don't give him, then he would say to them, "Okay, look, if you're not going to at least help me in business, at least give me food to get by till I can make my own money." And they wouldn't do either. So maybe that's how it evolved.
And the name Rinos is like Mar, like Shapta, the son of
I'm not sure. No, I don't. It's not Bar. It's Mar. If anything, Mar would be a master, like Mister. I don't know. Again, I think you're right. It's a foreign name. It's not necessarily a Jewish name. But let's continue. Do we see all the Rashi there? Maybe we did.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. So he had a tie on them because Mimanushak, they didn't treat him properly. And Rashi says the real root of it was they didn't have Rachmanis. A lot of times we use rationality, but in the end of the day, it's because we don't really have Rachmanis. That has to be cultivated. We have to try to, because we know the heart can become hardened. The Navi even says, you people have a lave of Evan. Your heart, it's funny because unfortunately in modern man become used to this idea of the hardening of the arteries and the hardening of the heart as like a physical problem, which we know can happen. But in Chazal, we see that there's a spiritual aspect of that as well, that a person can become hard-hearted and his lave can be compared to an Evan. And to a certain extent, it's a survival mechanism, right? Because if you fall apart, they say Rav Chaim Shmulevitz was an extremely feeling, emotional fellow, and someone I know whose father was a Rosh Yeshiva who became sick. He came to ask Rav Chaim Shmulevitz to daven for him, and he said immediately he broke down crying. And he was gushing tears. It wasn't just a fake.
Crocodile tears.
No, crocodile means fake. This was not fake. And the son said he was embarrassed because he said it seemed to me like he felt more deeply about my father being sick than I did. They used to hide newspapers on him because they knew that he wouldn't feel horrible if he saw different things that had happened and so forth. He had a real heart. And it's something you have to cultivate, because most people have a hardened heart because they feel if I have Rachmanis on everybody, I'll never actually survive the day.
And on yourselves.
Yeah.
When there was that terrible incident at the Yeshiva, those boys were shot by the Arab. We had a lecture afterwards by Rabbi Braun. We see that we need to be grateful for our heart of stone, because without it we would never cope with such a situation.
That's why
happened in Berkos Harav?
Yeah.
That's why they say the Navi says, "I'll come in." Hashem promises to come and replace our lave of Evan with the lave of Basar, because there will come a time when we will deserve to have a lave of Basar back. But right now it is hard. But we still can't suffice with that. It's good in a way that help us to survive the day after all these tragedies. We become a bit impervious to them. But the truth is, we have to try to work on ourselves, not to just walk around feeling, apathetic. In any event, okay, so we see over here, there's a tremendous time on these people, right? They're going to go to Gehenna, no matter how much, maybe they did do a certain amount of tzedakah. They certainly did mitzvahs. We're not talking about people that didn't do mitzvahs. They're still going to go to Gehenna. That's where Bissell Sulantu was afraid. He says, I don't want to have that responsibility. I might not fulfill it properly, and I might go to Gehenna. So, okay, so what's really so wrong over here? Amar
Amar
Hani.
They said. Or
No,
these people
Amar
said.
is he said.
He said.
Meaning he, the man who had just been wronged by the society there.
That you speak about them.
Yeah.
They. Ma'ariv Rav. They're from the Erev Rav. Yeah.
Which means that's why they don't have Rachmanis, right? Because if they're a proper Jew, there's a famous Gemora, maybe it's even over here, maybe this is the Gemora. It says there's 3 simanim of a Jew. What are the 3 simanim of a Jew? Rachmanim, Vaishanim, and Gomle Chasadim.
Right.
2 of those have to do with tzedakah, right? Rachmanim and Gomle Chasadim. Even Vaishanim, it shows that you're like a sensitive person. So if he says if someone doesn't have those signs, it's very possible he's not from the Jewish nation. So where is he from? Oh, must be from the Erev Rav. Elchanan Wasserman used to say that a lot of the people we see today who don't act Jewish, they're from the Erev Rav. Right? A lot of these people who run the government and so forth, and how could they do that? How can they just ignore basic Jewish values? How could they want to drive on Shabbos? How could they want to institute? I mean, it's one thing to drive themselves, but to institute it, just to uproot Judaism. And he would say that a lot of these people are from the Erev Rav. So that's what he's saying. These people who don't act Jewish, who are ignoring true Jewish values, don't have a Jewish heart, and that's one of the great simanim of a Jew, they must be from the Erev Rav. Keep going.
From the Erev Rav. Kai or Torah?
Ka'atu. Asu. They
Came.
they come from. These guys come from there. That's where they come from. They're not true Jews.
Yeah, Ketiv Natan Lacha Rachamim Rachamecha.
Okay, that's the pasuk. Now this is said, if I'm not mistaken, after what's called the Irani Dachas. Right? What's the Irani Dachas?
City of idol worship.
So what do you do there?
Destroy it.
Yeah. So what happens to a person if you have to kill all the men, women, and children of a city? That doesn't sound good, really, I'm sorry to say. You have a real problem if you just ended up doing a merciless thing. You may lose your mercy. And look what happened to people in Babel who didn't have the proper rachmanis. You want to become like them?
No.
That's why it says Rov Rofim Gehenim, by the way. Why a Rov Rofim Gehenim? You know why?
They don't have rachman on the patients.
Well, if they had to cut them open, I'm glad that they don't have rachmanis. They might not cut them open. How can you cut a person open unless you're a little bit cruel, right? But what happens if you do something cruel? You know what happens to you?
Become cruel.
You become cruel. If you become cruel, what does it say here in the Gemora? You end up in
Gehenna.
So what's going to happen? Shem tells you to do something cruel. What's going to save you from Gehenna? So that's why it's warning the doctors, right? That you are doing something that's cruel. You're cutting people open. You're taking out their limbs, and you're doing all sorts of cruel things.
Yeah.
So what's the guarantee they won't? So that's why Rov Roflim Gehenna. Most doctors will go to Gehenna because they become cruel people. Because they just, they're calloused, right? They have to cut open so many people and make life and death decisions. They become calloused. They lose their heart. They lose their soul. So they go to Gehenna. These people in Babel, same thing. But Hashem says, I'm asking you to destroy an entire city that's doing an avodah zorah, but I don't want you guys to become cruel people and get to Gehenna. That's not fair. You're doing a mitzvah in the Torah, you should get Gehenna. So Hashem promises that. Nasan lecha rachamim. Hashem promises to give you mercy. To compensate. It's like a person who loses blood. You know what you do? You give them an infusion of blood. Here, by destroying a city, they lose their feeling of rachmanis. Right? Like we said, it could make them a cruel person, chas v'sholom, which is horrible. It's a horrible thing. So Hashem says, He'll give you racham. He'll compensate you. Didn't what?
Destroy all of Amalek and became...
He had too much rachmanis, right? He shouldn't have had mercy on Amalek. Right? Sometimes it's misplaced. That's right. V'richa mecha.
So what about a husband and wife? Like, too much rachmanis on your wife, like you give it too much and you become...
The Gemora says that sometimes we have to learn from. Even there's a raven that's very cruel to his children. It says you have one of the people in the Gemora says you should be like a raven. Don't listen to the crying of your children. Go learn, and even though your children are hungry, that way at least you have learning. But if you have too much rachmanis on your children, you're never going to get any learning done. My Rebbe actually gave me a bracha when I got married. He said you should be able to learn even with the children crying. Sometimes you have to be a little bit cruel. But again, if you have to do something cruel, like destroy a city, or a doctor has to cut a patient open, but you have to dive into Hashem, you shouldn't lose your rachmanis, you shouldn't lose your compassion. That's what we see from this Gemora. It could happen very easily. If you do things that could produce cruelty, you could become a cruel person.
Mm-hmm.
But how are you going to fight that? You have to dive into Hashem to not let your heart become a heart. And then also learning Musar helps. Okay? So that's what it says over here. Hashem had to promise them, please go do this thing and I will give you rachamim. V'richa mecha. It's like a double dose. He'll give you rachamim and he'll have rachamim on you. And we learn from that.
Kol ha-rachayim al ha-bri'ot, and all of those that have rachamim on mankind, on the
creatures.
Yudu'ah shuhu mizara shel Abraham. They are children of Abraham. Avinu.
Right.
Okay.
You call me
she'ein merachim al ha-bri'ot, וידוע שאינו מזרע של אברהם אבינו. Is that not
yeah, pretty sad situation, right? You don't want to be someone who they say about you that you're not really Jewish because you don't act with compassion.
I want to be like that.
So it doesn't mean you don't do things that are cruel. Doctors have to do things that are cruel. In this case, where they had to destroy the city that was doing Avodah Zarah, there are often times in the Gemora, like I said, he tells them to go out and learn, even though the children are crying for food. Sometimes you have to do something that's cruel, but in your heart of hearts, you have to think, I'm only doing this because Hashem commanded me. I don't want to become cruel. I don't want to lose my siman of being a Jew, my heart, which is Jewish, my Jewish heart. And therefore, I have to dive into Hashem. Please, Hashem, you know that I'm trying to do this L'Shem Shemayim. Please help me not to lose my compassion. Please help me to remain a compassionate Jew, even with doing acts of cruelty.
When I put my kid to sleep, sometimes I let it cry for 10 minutes, but no, they tell that he needs to sleep.
Rav Orlowek used to say that you should put your hand in, they should feel your hand. You're not going to take them out of the crib, they're not going to get what they want, or they'll never learn to go to sleep. But they also shouldn't feel abandoned. Some people say, yes, you have to just let them cry, because Rav Orlowek used to say, I don't want to know what's going on in the mind of that child who feels abandoned. They may just be scarred for life. So you try to have compassion at the same time that you're not picking them up. They're going to cry, so at least they'll feel that there's someone there.
You sing with them first.
You could sing with them. But
do.
I'm saying that Rav Orlowek suggested that even when you let them cry, you put your hand in, they should feel that someone's with them. A bit of compassion together with the...
So I don't leave right away, I always make sure.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure that your child will grow up knowing that you're compassionate, because you are a compassionate person. Even though you might have to learn to be a bit more cruel sometimes.
I've had decisions before.
Okay, when you do it, you have to think in your heart of hearts, I don't want to happen what this Gemora talked about. I don't want to do an act of cruelty and become cruel. That means you have to dive into Hashem. Because it will happen unless you fight against it.
Yeah, but the other day I made a cool decision not to go home to South Africa one day. I wanted to go and so long to go.
Sometimes you have to be a bit cruel, but we have to also dive into Hashem. that nobody should be destroyed by it, that you're just doing it to try to do the right thing, and that you yourself shouldn't lose your compassion, your proper feeling of compassion. Okay, let's see the Rashi on this. The Nosam Lecha Rachamim.
Nosam Lecha Rachamim, give to you compassion. Shetrachem al habris, that you rachamim on the.
I think Rashi's trying to answer the double lashon in the pasuk. It says Nosam Lecha Rachamim v'richamecha. Hashem will give you rachamim v'richamecha. Why the double lashon? Rashi's saying He'll give you rachamim that you should be merachim on other people. He's not just going to have rachamim on you. He's going to give you rachamim that you should then take that rachamim and go be merachim on other people. That's why it says in the pasuk, to nasan lecha rachamim. He'll give you rachamim v'richamecha, and then you have to go and be merachim on other people. But that's the promise that Hashem gives by the Iranidachas, that you go and do that thing that should produce cruelty, but I promise you, you will not become cruel. I promise that Hashem will give you Rachmanis, that you should then go and be merachim on other people. It won't create a nature of cruelty. But in general, we don't always have that promise, so we have to try to daven for the proper emotion. Even if we have to do an act of cruelty, at least we should daven for our midos to not get destroyed. Okay, so now we have a new section, which is the same beginning as the last section, the same rabbi. So this the Gemora often does, to continue on in the same fashion with the same rabbi, because often when it's a bit unusual, we don't always have this rabbi. We like to, once we bring one mimer of his, to bring a few of them. Right? Even though the last one didn't have anything to do with the first one. What was the first one? 6 things that you have to know about how to deal with a wick on Yom Tov. The second thing was all about how to be, how to avoid being cruel and how to keep your midah brachamim. Now the third thing might have nothing to do with that either. It's just the same rabbi, Rav Nassim Bar Abba, in the name of Rav.
Rav Nassim Bar Abba, Amar Rav. Rav Nassim, continue, shall I read now?
Yeah.
Nassim Bar Abba is the name of Rav. Kol HaMetzape al Shulchan Acharim. Oilam. Everybody is always looking for his friend's table, right?
Mitzapeh can mean a few things. Mitzapeh can mean to expect. Like when you get to Olam Haba, they're going to ask you, Tzipisa liyeshua, did you really yearn and expect Mashiach? Did you expect the Yeshua? Or did you not really think it was going to happen? Right? So just that emotion of expecting something can be called tzipiyah. You're expecting it to come through some other person. The shulchan meaning the food that you eat at the table.
Shulchan expects, or he's waiting, right?
Basically, he eats by other people and he expects it to happen. He expects it to continue. That's what I think it's saying.
Choshech ba'ado.
Olam choshech ba'ado. Olam choshech. What's olam choshech?
World of darkness.
Sort of a world of darkness. It might also be referring to Gehenna, or it might just mean in this world. In this world, things will get dark for him. Ba'ado. What's ba'ado? Ba'ad means... No, it means for the sake of. Ba'ad. I'm doing this ba'adcha, for your sake. It's almost like bishvilcha. So for him, there's going to end up being a world of choshech. Okay, so in other words, it's not good to be always mooching off of other people, right?
Such as?
Well, in other words,
Sure.
let's say a person like a schnorr, like he's just happy to be always mooching off of other people. That's not... Obviously, sometimes we have to do it just to get by. There's no question that a person sometimes has to do it. But if it's something you end up expecting it, like today they say, it's my right. I have a right to receive welfare from the state, as it were. It's going to destroy the person, right? He's not going to be a proper human being anymore. Because that, as a recipient of it is very hard for a person to, again, keep his self-esteem and keep his sense of responsibility and he's always expecting people to give him handouts.
They're collecting for yourself,
Yeah, maybe, but again, sometimes it has to be done, so it's not like, we're saying the person should never do it, but there's a point where it becomes you're expecting people to do. It's almost like, those people that when you give them tzedakah, they throw it back in your face. It's like they have this attitude of like, you have to give me, and you have to give me what I want. It's like, it becomes like this new kind of pride, false pride, as it were, like a real gaiva.
Who does that? Who does that?
I've had it happen a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I gave an ani maybe 10 agorot in the time when he was expecting a shekel or something. I try now not to give such small amounts. I don't want to get that reaction. Lean at her, but it can happen. Anyhow, I might be misinterpreting this, so let's go on and let's see the context. There's no real Rashi on this, we have to just imagine what it means. Look, there are sometimes methods where you know a person can give more, and you know it's his chus, and the yeshiva really needs it. That's a bit different. That's why I feel it's better to always collect for a cause, like a yeshiva, than you're not really collecting for yourself. Of course, you're going to get something out of it, but when it comes down to it, you should be doing it with the kavanah of helping the yeshiva, of helping people learn Torah. That's what I think helps a person not be a schnorrer. Even though it's called a schnorrer, but it's really not a schnorrer. You're giving a person his chus to help Torah, to help support Torah. Alright, in the meantime, let's see what the Gemora says about this. Shene'emar.
Shene'emar, it says, Noida hu
lechem. It's a pasuk in Eov, apparently. You might have the full pasuk on the side there, I'm not sure. Maybe we should get a Gemora that has the full pasuk. In any event,